Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. You're very welcome to this session on the latest release of Enterprise. And as always, we've brought another exciting monthly release to you very seamlessly, very quickly, and obviously without any interference or disturbance in your day-to-day business and process within the platform. So I can see there's some people just still joining me there at the moment. So you're very welcome on board. So let me share with you and obviously just remind you of exactly what it is that we've delivered this month. And of course, the latest release, just in line with our Star Trek starships, is the Galaxy. So just to bring you fully aware of what it is that we've released and brought value and of benefit to you. So let me start by sharing my screen and let me simply just remind you of where we are this month. I'm just going to take myself off screen. You can still hear me there just so that you're not disturbed while you watch all the latest releases in action. So let me just remind you of what it is that we've brought to you this month. So starting off with our first great feature, which is sales contracts. So this is a huge complement to the last release in October where we brought you SLAs on service calls. So where we've enabled you to record SLAs and track those SLAs against your service calls. Now we're giving you the added ability to record and track the contracts, the agreements that you have with your customers around all of the services that you provide as well through the services module. So that gives you greater visibility, of course, over KPIs and in terms of those contracts that are currently valid with your customers. Well, how do you, number one, create those? How do you then track them through the services module? And of course, ultimately on a 360 view against your service calls, how do you identify customers that either do or don't have a valid service contract agreement with you? So really, you're just reducing down further administrative effort by being able to easily create and manage the customer contracts all within one platform. And we've made it very simple and very easy. What we have is we have a new contracts tab, and this is currently hosted within your services module. So there you'll be able to see and manage all of the contracts as they're being created. So whether you create those manually or simply start from a sales quotation and take that through to a service contract, you can use either option to do that as well. So we'll have a look at that in more detail during the live demonstration. So it'll make more sense to you as we go through it. Next up, we have the deferrer. So with deferrer, so this is a great way of being able to defer revenue and expenditure coming through on your sales and purchase invoices. So what really is the purpose of deferrer? Well, think about it in relation to any service agreements or products that you're selling, perhaps in terms of the cost of those products. How can you spread that, for example, over a certain period of time? So for example, like ourselves, we're a service provider. So you'll have perhaps a service agreement with ourselves over a 12-month period. And the idea behind the deferrer is to enable you to pay for and accrue that cost over the 12 months, for example. And from an accountancy perspective, then what you do is you defer that revenue. So where the invoice has been recorded today, and for example, let's say the contract was for 5,000 euro in revenue. So that contract for 5,000 is recorded today. However, how do we then defer that over the 12-month period going forward to ensure that, number one, we get a clear visibility on the customer count of what has been deferred, but number two, from a P&L or profit and loss perspective, that we can see that realized or recognized revenue each month. So where the revenue has come in on the sales invoice, then we need to send that off then to the deferred account, and then over the 12-month period then just to recognize and realize that amount divided by 12, for example, over the period that you've defined at that point in time. So of course you get improved financial accuracy, you gain clearer visibility of future revenue and cost obligations. So just more compliance around accountants, accounting standards, and of course, reducing down on, of course, manual adjustments. Key aspect of the deferrer, and again, I'll go through this once we look at the live demonstration, is that you can control, obviously, the number of months to defer. There's default options that you can specify as part of your setup. You can have different deferral accounts depending on, for example, the customer or supplier, but you can decide that at the point of time of actually doing the deferral. You can have certain default references that you apply as well to those journal entries as they're posted. Any remarks, the date in which you want the deferral to start, and more importantly, of course, the items to defer. What is that going to look like? And of course, stock items, of course, can contain different GL account determinations where you have items spread across, for example, different item groups. Yes, we take that into consideration where, for example, at line level, you could have a different revenue GL account to the next line, for example, there and so on. So therefore, the deferrer will look at it at a line level entry and then do the deferral based on that. And as I said, the setup is quite easy for that. So I'll show you that during the live demonstration. It really is a great addition to your sales and purchase invoices, and obviously from anybody working in the accountancy department in your organization. Next up, we have some wonderful additions that we've created on companies. So again, this is all built around giving you better visibility on delivery. So that's all your address handling, whether that's for your bill to or your ship to, also your contacts, how they're managed and created within the system. So one of the key things that we've done around the companies and particularly around addresses is that we have a new UI for hosting all of your addresses and for your contacts as well. All of them now will be contained in grid format. So it's a lot easier to the original UI, which if you remember was just a block for each address or a block for each contact. Now we have it simply maintained within a grid within your company screen, and it'll be very easy then for you to edit and visibly as well, just to see what is your default bill to, what is your default ship to, and then of course if you need to add additional addresses, it can be done very, very easily. In addition to that, we've added another switch, another toggle button, and that is when you're creating a new bill to or ship to address, you'll have the ability to copy to. So if it's a bill to, you'll have the ability to copy to ship to, and vice versa, copy ship to bill to. And again, it's just time saving having to add in 2 entries and continue on entering 2 entries all at once. Let the system do it for you and replicate that entry if you need it again as a ship to address, for example. We've also got the ability to create a contact from your company details. And the reasoning behind this, a great example here is that if, for example, you're dealing with customers on trade and you've got a trade counter in your warehouse or a store, a shop, and somebody's walking in and perhaps it's Joe Blogs and he's come in and he's just, he doesn't have an organization and he's come in to buy a set of, products and as a one-off, for example. But Joe is the organization and he's also the contact as well. So what we've done is we've made it very easy for Joe to come in and for you to administer that account setup within seconds. So type in the company name, Joe Blogs, and then you switch on the toggle switch, which you can see there, copy to contact. And when you copy to contact, it then creates a contact record that starts with Joe Blogs, first name, last name. And of course, if you've already added in the phone number and the email address, that will also be copied to the contact as well. So just another little great addition from an administration perspective, just always looking to streamline those creations and make it easy for you to add them and populate them into the system. Faster and easier, and then just reducing down the data entry and of course saving time and of course any additional errors that might be created during the additions themselves. So again, I'll show you that through the live demonstration, and of course there's a few bits around that I'd like to make you aware of as well during the live demonstration, and it's all here and there's so much more. And as always with every delivery that we do every month, you would have logged on Monday morning and you would have received a pop-up on screen to let you know that Galaxy had landed with all of these great features and with obviously the ability to join me here today on the webinar. But as always, we have help center article as well that will detail all of these with a link to our story lane demos. So I'll remind you about that as well when we go through the live demonstration. But as you can see here, lots of more added benefit for you as well. So for example, starting here on sales, we basically applied all of the existing Wyze panels to transactions in ad mode. And I'll explain that as we look at the live demonstration, because there's some lovely key pieces there as well, particularly around your company's Wyze panel, your build to and ship to addresses. And we've also included there an integration with Google Maps, a lovely, great key feature. Again, it's keeping you on top of delivery routes and making you fully aware of, particularly for salespersons, as they're adding in a quote or an order, that they can be very much aware of delivery routes that potentially will come into play, or if they need to maybe go out and pop out and see the customer. We've also got an added benefit around historical prices. These can now be exported to Excel. So that's where you click on your unit price on your sales transactions or sales or purchase transactions to see the historical prices of what you've sold to your customers or purchased from your suppliers. And now you can export those to Excel. And plenty more there, as you can see, around CRM, around settings, and we've extended our offering around the bank feed integration. We've incorporated more European countries into our offering there, as you can see, for the Netherlands, Germany and France-based organizations. So lots have been delivered. So I think the next step really is just to bring you into the live system and let you see some of all this great functionality in a live demonstration. So bear with me now and let me just share my screen with you. And we will just jump over to the live platform. And here we are. So let me just fill up the screen for you there so you can see everything quite easily and seamlessly. So starting off with our contracts. So first of all, I want to show you where contracts currently reside. So this is where we have now housed contracts, and you can see there we have a new contracts tab within the services module for all the different contract agreements that you will have and maintain with your customers. So where do you need to start? So you can simply start here by creating a new sales contract directly from here. And if I click on, for example, we just select an item contract here, we can start off by selecting the customer and populating the information. Now you will see that in terms of the layout of the screen, it mimics exactly what you're used to already in terms of your sales transactions, but specifically in relation to your sales quotations. In addition to that, we have an end date, because of course that's important. So we have our posting date, our renewal date, and then we have the end date of the contract itself, so that you can track all of the relevant information as you add the contract details. So I'm just going to go back one step, and I'm going to bring you back from a sales quotation, because I just want to show you how easy this can be. So the customer has phoned and they've said, look, yeah, we want to go ahead with that. We want to go ahead with a new contract. And what you've managed to do is you've quoted the customer. So let's open up the quote. So this is the quote you've already issued to the customer, and you've quoted them there, as you can see, for €5,000 for a contract. So now they've confirmed, yeah, we wish to go ahead with that. Great. So now let's copy that to a contract. So we're turning the quote into a contract. It comes into the Add Sales Contract screen. All of the information that's taken from the quote is automatically populated. I can now look here to the renewal dates, the end date, for example. So for example, I'm just going to go to the end of January, just as a starting point. And if you go down here, you can see that the item has already been copied across. I can, of course, add additional lines, whether that's text or additional products, whatever I want to add into the contract, I can do that at this stage, as you could do with all other transactions. And of course, if we save this then, let's just save the contract. And of course, we can email that to our customer as well. Now we revert here to the contracts tab that I showed you at the start. So from here, like all other transactions, we can track the contract. When it was opened, we can see that it was opened. We can see the renewal date. We can see the end date, for example. We've got all our Wyze panels here to click through for bill to, ship to, our company details as well on the click through here. And of course, as with all other transactions, we can search, we can follow, we can share for emailing purposes. We've all the same various actions. We can duplicate. We want to create the same contract again, Or we can copy back to a sales quote. Perhaps we want to quote them again and bring it back to quote. Maybe it's at the end of the agreement and they haven't made a decision yet, and we can put it back into the sales process to take it further. So just back on the contracts tab itself, so you can see all of the information. It acts the same as any other transactions grid so that we can see the number of lines in relation to that particular contract. So I can just drill in here on the Wyze panel for the item line details to find out exactly what it is that the contract covers at this point in time. But more importantly, so now that we have the contract established, let's go over to the service call stage. So this is important, of course. As you know, we've introduced the SLAs, and of course we have projects and activities. So we've got a hive of information and data that's already coming through against our service calls. So what's important here against a service call for this particular customer is that you track the right contract. So when we come in here to the service call, and let's just edit the service call here, or if this was a new service call, for example, and if we come in here now to sales contract, you can see there our newly created contract, because it is the only one we have for this particular customer. We can click on that on the list and we can click on save. It's already linked to a particular stock item. We can update that if we wish. And of course you can add on batch serial numbers if that's applicable to you as well. But the great thing here is on your services calls. So for example, here on the service call itself, I also have a click through back to the sales contract to see exactly what the details are. So I can click here and I can perform, of course, direct updates, just very minimum again. So it'll launch a Wyze panel to update certain parts of the contract. If I want to view that in detail, as always, your blue click button here to view the contract in detail itself. So let's just go back to the service calls grid. As always, the grid tells you a huge story. So on reflection of the service call, so let me just go back out of there and let me just refresh that screen again, go back into service calls. So what we should see here under our contract tab, we should see, for example, that we've linked it now to contract number 132. I might just need to refresh the screen just so I can see that, but this is where it's going to show. So already you get a 360 view of a service call, and if it's number one under SLA, if it's within the SLA, for example, within the SLA agreement in terms of start date and end dates, and of course, if it's linked to a valid contract. So all important information for anybody working within the services industry, or if it's even relevant to internal calls, etc. as well. So you can make it work for whatever you need. So moving on then to Deferrer. So where do we begin with Deferrer? Well, we start here in settings. Let me just show you here in module settings. And if I scroll on down, this is where you can then enable the Deferrer. So we've got revenue and cost deferring. I simply just switch it on here. I mentioned already about the default values. So this is where you can set the defaults that you would require generally for your system. Remember that these can be overwritten at the time of doing the deferred sales invoice or deferred purchase invoice. So default number of months to defer. The importance here is that you don't exceed the current open periods within your accounting system. So for example, you always have to check before you enable this, check and ensure that you have the required number of open periods within your organization. If this is something you don't have visibility to in your organization, do reach out to support and do make sure that you check that in advance, or if you're dealing with a consultant, to make sure you have sufficient open periods into the future in order to do your deferrals. We've got a default balance sheet account for purchases and sales. So these are mandatory. You have to have a balance sheet account. One is a liability and one is an asset. So a liability for the sales one and an asset for the purchases one. And then just a couple of default remarks that you can also have which come through to the journal entry postings. So let me show you what happens then on, for example, a sales invoice. So if we start here with a sales invoice, and I'm just going to show you this one here, which is 313. I've got two open lines on this particular invoice. You can see there are the two values. And if we open up the invoice itself, and if we go to actions and simply click on defer revenue. So this is where it begins, and this is the setup tab. So all those default values have automatically come through. Remember what I said, that this is now changeable. So if you decide that this particular customer, it's a specific agreement, then in fact they're going to pay for, or we're going to realize the revenue over 6 months as opposed to 12, we can reduce that down. So let me do that. Let me just take that down to 6. Okay. The deferral account, maybe you only have one, but maybe you have more. You can change that at this point as well. Your references. We've got a reference 1 and a reference 2. And clearly you can see the reference 1 is your invoice number here, your sales invoice number. Reference 2 is the customer account code. Now you can change those because again, your journal is going to have reference to those as well. But it's important to make sure that when those journals come through that you have an identifier that specifies the sales invoice that it's come from, the customer that it's for, or in the case of your expenses that you can define the supplier as well. You've got the remarks as well that will come through to the journal. Next, we have the deferral start date. So the deferral start date is when do you want the recognized revenue to start to kick in. So maybe you might want that to start in from the 1st of December. So let me do that. Let me change this to the 1st of December. Now, what that will actually mean is, and let me show you what that will mean. If, for example, I choose this first item here to defer, and I decide the second item is not going to get deferred at all, I can choose the first item, I can come to the preview screen, and this simply gives me a look at what journals will be created. So these are draft, they don't exist anywhere else. There's just simply a preview of what will actually happen. So what will happen is on the 25th, so today's date, we'll have the initial movement from whatever the revenue account is on the GL account determination into the deferred revenue account. So that's the first thing that will happen, and you can see that at today's date. Then on the 1st of the 12th, you'll see the first of the 6 journals that will take it from the deferred revenue, so it'll debit the deferred revenue and then realize the split, which is by the 6 months, into the relevant revenue account. So you can see that there, that's over the 6 months. That's what it's potentially going to do. And if we go back to setup, when we're ready to go ahead, if we click on save, you will see that it's going to create 7 journals. So 0 of 7 journals, it's going to create those now. So the first one will move the full amount out into the deferred account, and then the subsequent 6 will be the division by the 6 months that we specified to move it back into the revenue GL account. And as you can see, that first item is now gone. So we can always come back in at a later time and defer the second item if that is what you require. So you can do it line by line or all lines together. Whatever the choice is, you can do both. So if we come back out of here and if we go in now, for example, to accounting, of course, as with all journal entries, you can come into accounting, go to journals, and you can analyze those journals further. There we have, for example, from here, there's the first one created with the 10,000. I'm just going to highlight that there for you. And then the subsequent 6 journals thereafter for each month, as you can see, all future posting dates for each month, starting from the 1st of December. And of course, if you've got cost centers as well allocated to the invoice, they too will come through to the detailed posting of all of the journal entries. And that's another great way of analyzing your deferred revenue or expenditure if you're only using, for example, one revenue or one expenditure GL account. It's a great way to analyze those further. So that's your deferred revenue, and of course the same will apply on the purchasing. I'm not going to go through that fully in step by step, but just quickly to show you here that on a purchase invoice, it's exactly the same steps, that when you come in here to the actions menu on a purchase invoice, you go to defer cost, and we get exactly the same screen, except we get the different defaults for purchasing, and of course they can be changed and select the items as you so wish. When you have deferred an invoice in full, what I should say to you is that when it has been done in full and you look back, for example, on the invoice in question, so if, for example, defer revenue, when they have been deferred in full, all you will see is a preview of the actual posted journals with a blue link to get you back into each and every one of those journal entries. Okay, so moving on to companies, last but not least. So lots of wonderful added benefit here in relation to your companies and visibility around delivery. So what's happening around your delivery and bill to and ship to addresses. So let me just quickly show you here on an existing customer account. So when we drill into that account, when we click on addresses, you now have a new addresses grid with all of the addresses defined line by line, much easier to see and understand what addresses you currently have against and set up against a customer account. And of course, very easy to manage and maintain, and very easy to identify and very quickly to identify which ones are the default addresses. And of course, if you need to delete any of those, if they're no longer relevant, it's very easy to manage going forward. And of course, adding a new address, and I mentioned this already, that if you were to define, for example, a new bill to address, you will have a button here at the bottom, copy to ship to, where you can switch this on and create a corresponding ship to address with the very same details. The same, of course, with the contacts. We've got a full new grid to manage and maintain all your contacts for your companies, and again, to add the contacts directly from the company's grid. So again, better visibility on creating additional contacts and being able to manage those and see again at the first glance who's active, who's default, and just as important, and particularly around advanced billing, who's your billing contacts for the advanced billing within the sales module. And of course, if you have self-service in terms of the customer portal, who's been switched on or not in terms of that particular customer. So just better visibility across the board. When it comes to creating a new customer, for example, if we click on new customer, and just show you here, I mentioned about Joe Bloggs coming into the trade counter and buying a series of products. How do we record that account? But even more importantly, how do we copy that account to a contact and do it very easily? So for example, if we start off here with Joe Bloggs, just let me put that in, it doesn't matter. And we'll just say that they're a customer, and we will just populate a phone number, and I'll just put in the default email. You can see here the toggle. So copy to contact. So if I switch that on, click on save, you'll see here it opens up a Wyze panel. It takes the name, so Joe Bloggs, it takes it as the full name. It takes the first name and last name from that on the split, and it populates the phone number and the email address, and I can populate if I have any additional information there, and I can save that. So I'm already saving myself some administration by doing this. And now we have the new customer account, but automatically I also have the contact saved. So I'm saving administration time, I'm saving time, I'm adding that information in, but it works great for customers that are coming through the door and that don't necessarily belong to an organization, and you want to be able to add them into the system really quickly, really easily, and perhaps issue invoices, orders, whatever it is that you need to follow on in relation to that particular customer, that you can do that there and then, click on new action and follow all the way through with whatever new transaction you need to send on to them. So last but not least, and this again is all around your companies, let me just remind you here, because I think this is just, again, some great new features that we've added on. So for example, if I'm adding a new sales order, for example. So let me just show you here that when we add a new sales order, let me select the customer. You will see now that we've activated in add mode, we've activated the customer field, the bill to and ship to address. So let me click here on the customer field. So the company details that you can already see when you're in view mode or editing a sales order, you can now see when you're adding a sales order. So get up-to-date information about that customer in relation to balances, the last invoice, etc., particularly if you're going to be sending through a sales order and you want to check maybe on pricing. For example, on your bill to and ship to, if we click here on the bill to, so we've now fully integrated with Google Maps. So at least you get a full holistic view again on delivery routes and maybe what needs to happen. Perhaps again, we've got a sales rep here adding in a quote or an order, and they want to just quickly check where the customer is located, check it here on the maps, and maybe just put a call out into the diary to make sure that that's followed through. So we can see this very easily now on the bill to and ship to addresses on your transaction screen. So lots of new wonderful added benefits throughout the system, and obviously lots more to come. What's important here is just to remind you of where you can check those out, and as always, help.enterpryze.com. When you land in here, just come into news and updates, and the latest release is always at the top. So here we have Galaxy. Click into Galaxy, and all of those great features I've talked about and demoed are also here and listed, but more importantly, they also have the step-through demos for you to go through those and take your time to understand how to use the function and perhaps look at how that's going to work within your business and within your processes. So as always, guys, lots more to come. And there's plenty more to come, particularly around the companies and particularly around your delivery routes as well in the coming release. But that's it for now, and certainly probably that's it for this year. And I do appreciate you taking the time out to join me on the monthly webinars. But as you can see, as always, it's worth your while and worth your time to learn about all of the great things that are coming to you every month within Enterpryze. And of course, as I said, this is probably the last one, but we'll keep you posted if there's anything new to share with you. As always, the university is up and running currently for term 2. So we've purchasing tomorrow morning at 9:30. If you still want to join us, there is a link on the website in the resources page. So enterpryze.com, click on resources, click on Enterpryze University to get the link and join us on the journey of learning about all of the wonderful features within the platform. And thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care.